Oscar Robertson, also known as the Big O, one heck of a great basketball player. He grew up in poverty in the housing projects and segregated schools. And this guy in the 1970s single-handedly changed the NBA and professional sports. And he did it by himself. And today you're going to learn his story and kind of how he used the law to beat the big corporations. So this amazing basketball player, a true hero of mine, he was born in 1938 in Tennessee, and his family was so poor, his parents couldn't get work. They moved to Indianapolis, lived in the housing projects, and he went to segregated schools. And he was a really good basketball player, and he really worked hard. He loved basketball. I could go on forever about stories of how hard he was working. And then ultimately, he went to Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati, and played for the Cincinnati. And then he went on to a professional basketball team after college, the Cincinnati Royals. Did you guys know there was a basketball team called the Cincinnati Royals in the NBA? The Cincinnati Royals ultimately went to Kansas City and were the Kansas City Royals, not the baseball team, the basketball team. And then they became the Kansas City Kings, and then eventually moved to Sacramento. So he originally played for the team that eventually became the Sacramento Kings. And what happened was this. He was playing for them, they're an NBA team. Now, the NBA, National Basketball Association, right, good old Michael Jordan and these amazing basketball players, it started the NBA in 1946. So right after World War II, the NBA started, and the first game was the New York Knickerbockers, the Knicks, playing against Toronto. I forgot what team, with the team that eventually became the Raptors, it would call something else, but they played in Toronto. That was the first game. No, the first NBA game wasn't even in the United States, it was in Canada. All right, and then the NBA, started adding more teams and became very, very popular. And by the 1960s, some other leagues started, right? Some like competitive, some leagues that tried to compete with the NBA, and the NBA would buy some of these leagues, or just force them out of business because they were just so popular. Until 1967, the American Basketball Association, the ABA, came around, and they were really good and very popular. You may have seen, I remember, I watched basketball early enough where they would reference games from the ABA, but not, the ABA was before my time. But, they had that cool basketball with a red, white, and blue basketball. And, the ABA invented the slam dunk contest. So Oscar Robertson was playing for the Cincinnati Royals. And then in 1967, the ABA was formed, and it became very popular as well. And then the NBA wanted to purchase the ABA, okay? Kind of like merge, it was an acquisition, okay? So that they would just absorb the ABA. Now, big, successful companies, they do this all the time, and I hate it with a passion. What these big companies do, and to this day, and they've done it forever, is that when they notice a smaller company kind of growing, there's this fear that, oh my God, what if this small company that grows becomes successful and big enough and then competes against us, right? Like Facebook bought Instagram. Why did they buy Instagram? Just to kill the competition, right? Facebook bought WhatsApp, I could go on forever. Amazon, I put a tiny list. They bought toy stores. They bought Egghead software. There was this company called Egghead where you could buy. I remember that one, and then they had cheap they just specialized in selling software stuff, right? Amazon bought them. Amazon bought Zappos, that was focused just on selling shoes and accessories with shoes. Amazon bought Whole Foods. They bought all these bookstores. And so, again, I could go on, diapers.com or something. They just bought a bunch of them. So, and one thing that upset me, Starbucks does this all the time too. The Starbucks keeps buying competitive companies. They bought Seattle's Best Coffee. One time I had a friend that's like, no, I don't like to go to Starbucks, just out of principle. So I drink Seattle's Best Coffee. And I said, oh, well, guess what? That is Starbucks. Starbucks bought them. And the thing that I couldn't stand is it was called like Tea in Heaven or Tea in something, Tea in Leaf, maybe something like that. So Starbucks, I don't remember them because Starbucks bought them. It was kind of like a tea version of Starbucks or something. And sure enough, right after they bought them, oh, we're going to be a great opportunity, blah, blah, blah. They closed all those stores down, So, so back to Oscar Robertson, okay? So he was playing for the NBA, and in 1970, the NBA said, it became known, okay, we're looking to buy the ABA, right? And this upset Oscar Robertson because what happened is this. Then the NBA had these rules about the players, okay? And these rules go like this. If for the players that played in college, they played college basketball without consent from them and without any sort of dialogue with them or whatnot, is that the teams would get together and they would have what was called the draft, okay? And the draft goes like this. It's that they're like, okay, here's the list of the players that are coming out of college. And then, the Minnesota Lakers and the New York Knicks and the Toronto Raptors, the 76ers, they kind of get together and they say, okay, I'll take this guy. And then the next team goes, I'll take this guy. I'll take this guy. Now, the problem with the draft is then these players have no choice but to play for that team because all the teams had agreements with each other that once a player is drafted, that the other teams will not negotiate with him, right? So then that player could only play for that team, okay? And then, the theory, the NBA would say, well, just play for another league, right? But in 1970, they were making that impossible too because they were buying the most popular league that could possibly compete with the NBA, right? So, and then once they bought that league, then it would be, even more impossible, right, to play for another team. The ABA had really cool teams, the Denver Nuggets, the Indiana Pacers, the New Jersey Nets, and my absolute favorite, the San Diego Conquistadors, okay, that ultimately became the San Diego Clippers and then the Los Angeles Clippers. I do remember the Clippers playing in San Diego. I liked the San Diego Clippers, and then they moved to LA. Okay, so when in 1970, when the NBA is then going to purchase the ABA, right? This became a problem because all the players are like, oh man, now we can't, we can't even go to another league because that other league is going to be the NBA, right? The NBA is buying it, and the NBA had these rules about. The college draft. And then they also had a rule, they called it the uniform contract. And that rule was this: once a player gets drafted by a team, then that team owns that player forever, right? Meaning they own the rights to him forever. And that the agreement with the other teams is that no other team would negotiate. There was a boycott against negotiating with that player until the team agrees to either sell his contract or agrees that we don't want him. You could negotiate with him if you want. They voluntarily agree, right? So obviously, this in terms of contract negotiation, right? It's tough for the player because the player has to go to the team and then say, okay, I'm a really good player and I want to negotiate, and the team says, well, we'll give you this much money, or you can't play anywhere, right? That is a very, very difficult negotiation power, especially after they're going to buy this other league, all right? And then they also forbade What's the past tense of forbid? Forbade? All right. Forbidden. Oh, we gotta look that one up. Okay. So they disallowed their players from playing in other leagues or making any sort of side money playing anywhere. So even that was disallowed, right? So it's like you could only play here. And you have no other choice. So obviously there was no negotiation power. So our man, right, Oscar Robertson, also known as the Big O, in 1970 then, he filed a antitrust lawsuit against the NBA and the ABA and all of the team owners, okay? And he filed it in the federal court in New York, all right? And then, of course, the first order of business, jurisdiction, okay? Because the lawsuit, the allegation was that the two leagues were violating the Clayton Antitrust Law, which is a federal law, passed by Congress. And because it was a federal law, then, the federal question, it's called, it's a federal law. So you're allowed to sue in federal court. And the reason why it was in New York is because that is where the head offices was located. All right. So that is where we are. We're in the federal court, and he sued them in April 1970. And the allegation was, like I said, these antitrust violations. Now comes, these interesting things that happen after that. All right. Get this. So the first thing he asked for is an injunction against the merger. Okay. Meaning that the way it works is this. Okay. Imagine this. Your Honor, we want to delay any sort of merger until we decide the case, right? And we think we're going to win. We have good grounds for winning, and it's not going to hurt them if they wait a little while, a few years for the merger. And once the merger happens, we can never undo it. So we want to enjoin the two leagues from merging until we decide the case. So what ends up happening in these injunction cases, right? So the first thing is the injunction. That takes sometimes a few years to decide, okay? And gosh darn it, it goes like this. We're going to have an injunction just so we could have a few years to decide if the merger violates federal law. Do you see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going here? So that's the first thing he asks for. He asks for the injunction. And sure enough, it was granted, okay? So the federal court granted his injunction saying, you know what? We're not going to allow the NBA and the ABA to merge. It's the two biggest leagues, and they can't merge right now. Let's decide the case and let the appeals happen and whatever it takes. And during that time, let's disallow the leagues from merging, okay? So he won the injunction, okay? And the NBA was so powerful that they then went to the Senate, okay, of the United States of America. They went to the Senate to ask the Senate for an antitrust exemption to the Clayton antitrust law so that they could have, all the bargaining power and everything, right? Congress did have an antitrust exemption for Major League Baseball, okay? But it didn't have one for basketball. The Major League Baseball was like a long time before this one, okay? And then the Senate said, no, we're not gonna just give you an antitrust exemption. It was kind of interesting because the senator that really came up to block it was Senator Sam Ervin of North Carolina. He was on the Senate Antitrust Committee, and it's kind of interesting, this guy, because this is in 1971, but back in the 50s and 60s, he was a big advocate of segregation. I mean, he said, all these, the white school children and the black school children, they should go to different school. And he was a big time segregist, is that what it's called, right? But apparently he was also a big time antitrust advocate too. Okay, so that was, maybe he just hated the NBA also, I don't know. But he said, he pushed for the Senate to not give basketball the antitrust exemption from Congress. All right. So then what happened then is that the two leagues were not allowed to merge. But that's not the end of the story. It's not over.
Nothing is over. Nothing.
Okay. We actually have to decide if this violates antitrust law. So then what happened is that a mechanism for going to a trial is this. So ultimately, a jury would have to decide if the merger is such a big deal that it would unfairly restrict players from being able to play or to negotiate, and that it would kind of, kill the competition type of thing. A jury would have to decide that, because the law is this. If a merger or acquisition is so, I'll just say big, that it restricts unfairly, competition, and it, either drives prices up or gives the corporations too much of a negotiating power, then it is, then it would be a violation of the Clayton antitrust law. All right. And the theory is that a jury should decide that. Okay. Now, before a jury decides that, one party can ask the judge to dismiss the whole case before a jury decides it. So, and that's always the defendant for a lot of reasons. It's easier for the defendant to have a case dismissed than a plaintiff to have a case won just by the judge without going to the jury. Okay. So the mechanism works like this. It's called a motion for summary judgment. So what I always tell people when they file a lawsuit, a plaintiff, is this. Even if it's a car crash or, I got fired unfairly or something, you have to first win your case with the judge. And then when you win your case with the judge, then you have to win your case with the jury. Okay, if you lose with the judge, the case is dismissed on a summary judgment. And if you win with the judge, you don't win. You then have to win with the jury. I remember one plaintiff in particular, he was so happy that we beat the motion for summary judgment. The judge ruled in our favor. And then he's like, let's go celebrate. And then, we actually celebrated. And then, I'm like, all right, cool. I'll keep you posted on the trial. He goes, the trial? We just won. I said, we did win. We won the right to go to a trial. Okay, that's how it works. So, what happened here is then the NBA filed a motion for summary judgment. Okay, the NBA and the ABA, they filed this motion for summary judgment. The lawsuit was filed what year? 1970. It wasn't until 1975, okay, when the court made a decision on that. All right, and here it is. Here is the federal court opinion in 1975. The court ruled that the NBA was so powerful, and that by purchasing the ABA, they would be even more powerful, and it would be so powerful. And then these mechanisms like the college draft, and then, not, disallowing players from negotiating with other teams, and then owning a player's rights for his whole life. The court ruled that was enough evidence where it should be a jury that decides if that is too much restriction on trade and competition. Okay, so in 1975, the court rejected the NBA and ABA's motion for summary judgment. So, do we win? Did Oscar Robertson win? No, kind of. Lawyers love saying, well, it depends, right? So if you were to ask a lawyer, so did we win in 1975? Well, I would say it depends. If you mean we won the right to go to trial, then we won. If you mean did we win the whole case? No, we did not win the whole case, okay? So in 1975, 5 years after the lawsuit was filed, and the beauty was the two leagues were enjoined from merging during this whole time because we have to decide the case, right? So the plaintiff won the motion for summary judgment, and then there was going to be a trial set for the next year, 1976. So in 1976, there would be a trial, okay? And then that's why I tell plaintiffs, you have to first win with the judge, and Oscar Robertson did. He won with the judge. Then you have to win with the jury. So that's 1976. Now that I think about it, there's a third one. You have to win with the judge in the trial court. Then you have to win with the jury. Then you have to win with the appeal, right? So, but the appeal doesn't always get filed. But you would, if there's an appeal filed, you would have to win there too. Okay, I'm going to change that. I've been practicing law for 23 years, and I'm going to change it to telling a plaintiff, you have to win 3 times. Trial court judge, the trial jury, and then the appellate court. Okay, only if you could win all 3 do you win your case. Okay, so then the trial set for 1976. On the day the trial was supposed to start, the parties reached a settlement agreement. All right. Now, these big companies only settle if they are convinced that there's a good chance they're going to lose in court, all right? So here's how the settlement worked. And this is how, when I said Oscar Robertson changed the whole framework of how athletes can negotiate. This is how, it's this settlement that did it. The settlement that was reached said, okay, you're going to dismiss your case, Mr. Robertson, and then the 2 leagues are going to merge. Okay, so and you agree to that. You're not going to try to stop it now. And we are going to agree to end the uniform contract. Okay, meaning if we sign a player, if that original deal, let's say we sign him for 5 years, once that ends, then he's free. He's a free man, or they also call it a free agent, because before this settlement, when a player, let's say he signs a 5-year deal out of college, after that 5-year deal, he still has to play for the same team. He doesn't have a choice, right? Unless they trade him. So now it says after the initial deal, that player is allowed to play for other teams. Okay, so that it created free agency. All right, and then the other thing it created was, let's see, the terms of the settlement agreement are very, very, very good. All right. The other thing it created is this. They went back and they paid about $5 million to previous players. And because when Oscar Robertson filed his lawsuit, he filed it on behalf of himself and all of the players. And one of the arguments was that it has been so horrible all these years that all these players should get some more pay retroactively because they've been screwed over. And the NBA agreed to it, okay? So then they went back, like I said, $5 million. This is the 70s, so it's got to be worth more today, And they went back to all the players and they started paying them, retroactively, okay? And then the other one that they agreed to was that the players, when they are eligible, when they're drafted, if they don't like the team they're drafted for, they could sit out for a while. I think it's a year. Okay, it changed over the years that through collective bargaining agreements with a union. But there's a mechanism like right after college that if they get drafted by a team they don't like, then they can they're a free agent right away. Okay, so that was another way. So all of these things improved the negotiation power for the athletes. I love it. I love it all. Oscar Robertson. I mean, it's an amazing story. Like I said before, we got this one guy and he stood up, to everybody. He stood up to the NBA League, the ABA League, all of the different owners and San Diego Conquistadors, he stood up to all of them and he fought for 6 years. And by the end of the 6 years, he wasn't even playing anymore. I mean, he was, he just wasn't playing. He retired. He couldn't keep up with the younger guys, right? And because he fought and he stood up, all the players today have a much better position. Okay, so good stuff. As always, I love hearing from you guys. Thanks for all the comments in the past week. And as always, I'll see you next week.